thank the staff for coming before us today. I had hoped to speak to you as the committee had prior to the publication of the draft document, especially if you had been in receipt of Irish Water's submission itself. I know when you met us, you weren't, and you had assured us you would speak to us about that. But anyway, it's water under the bridge, I'm afraid. I would hope in the questions that I address to you that they relate to your three core briefs as given to you by the government, that being the effectiveness from a cost-based perspective, the economic framework and access to capital markets, and the customer services standards. And I'll just start where you finished, actually. I find it unbelievable, to be quite honest, that you haven't ascertained as of yet what the first fix policy is in relation to Irish Water, while the charging is ongoing since October. And was it always your belief or your brief, as directed by government, not to have that in place prior to charging commencing? And is that now as a result of what has come out in recent days with the excessive costs in relation to call-out charges of €188 during office hours, €282 out of office hours, €141 an hour thereafter, and €220 for a pressure test? You mentioned that your brief is also to allow you to assess and make recommendations in relation to charges Irish Water may charge its consumers and other means of income. Is this other means of income? And is this now only coming to light? And is it coming to light against a background where you have not yet clarified what the policy is in relation to first fix? To go back to the start, you say that the cost base you believe is excessive to the tune of 8%. What costs exactly do you find excessive? Did you find the startup costs excessive? Do you find the ongoing operation costs excessive? Did you factor into your analysis the payment system that exists for staff? Or does that fall under your remit, or is it something outside of your control? In relation to the economic framework and the assessment of its viability into the future and its ability to raise access and to access funds from capital markets. Last week's budget saw a further 65 million government subvention through the benefits package and the fuel allowance and the tax credits which ensued. We're led to believe that up to 1 million people have not yet returned their packs. And based on an 80% compliance rate, the total revenue from domestic users might be in the region of 160 million. Have you factored compliance rate into your assessment of their income? And if so, what percentage of compliance rate have you assessed? Is it 80%, is it 100%, or is it, some would say it might only be 50% when the dust settles? And in doing that, have you asked, have you had an opportunity at all to assess the impact of the increased subvention that I just mentioned that has come since you set the charges in motion? In relation to free allowances, they've been significantly reduced on the 1st of October compared to when you put out your draft document. You went from 38,000 litres for children down to 21,000. Where exactly did you get your data, or what scientific evidence was available to you in order to make that assertion? And will you publicise where that information emanated from? And did you give any consideration to those 18-year-olds and over whom are attending college, for example, being assessed with an adult charge? I think you've given a commitment to on an ongoing basis review this. That sounds to me, as you weren't so sure as to the eminence of the data that was available to you to make that assertion in the first place. In relation to boiled water notices, I welcome the fact that you moved to give an immediate refund from day one, or day two actually, in relation to boiled water notices. What I fail to understand, and what I'm greatly disappointed with, is that you only see fit to give a 40% discount to non-domestic users. What does that say to the commercial sector, to the tourist sector, to the licensed trade, to the restaurants, in Roscommon and other places where a boiled notice might exist? How are they expected to carry on regardless? How are they expected for their business to succeed when you're hitting them with such charges and the costs are far excessive in relation to how they supply water to their customers? Have you done any, just to get back to the first fix and to the call-out costs, what data have you assessed in order to allow Irish Water to arrive at those prices mentioned? What analysis have you carried out of similar situations in other areas where water charges are part of the income for those providing it? So I think if you just move to answer some of those questions, it might lead to others.
I'll try and answer them in the order that you put them, Deputy. I think, first of all, in relation to the first fix policy, under the first fix policy, Irish Water may be spending 51 million euro. And it's very important that if they're spending that level of money, that it is properly accounted for. So it has always been our intention that we would have to analyse the first fix policy, put it out for consultation in order to ensure that we were looking at a policy which delivered value for money for all consumers. What we're saying is that at the moment there is a pilot study underway by Irish Water in relation to first fix, comprising 100 first fixes. The results of that pilot study, along with their proposal in relation to what the first fix policy will mean, or what they are proposing the first fix policy would mean, is going to be available to us for a public consultation in the first week of November. And our intention is that the first phase of the first fix will kick off in January of 2015. Based on what we would call a partial approval to them. So we will grant them an approval on certain terms and conditions for a certain amount of money from January 2015. And then we will follow up that with a full and final decision in relation to the first fix policy. It's important, so that is where we are in relation to the first fix policy. This isn't a decision that we've come to just in the last day or two. This is we have known for some time that the first fix policy needed to be consulted on in order to ensure that value for money was achieved in terms of whatever they did in relation to that matter. In relation to call-out charges, Irish Water have put forward proposals to us in their water charges plan concerning call-out charges. We have expressed concern about the level of those call-out charges. So what we have said is that we have not approved those charges, that we will actually consult on what those charges should be. And we've stated quite clearly that if anybody was to incur those charges as put forward, that they would be rebated any charge that they paid over and above what we would eventually approve. So we have not signed off on any call-out charges by Irish Water. Yeah, Cathy, you may want to add on that.
Sorry, could I add something to that one? There is no link between the first fix policy and the call-out charges, because when I first read about it in the press, they seem to go hand in hand. So the first fix policy is all about how Irish Water fixes a leak, and it's at no cost to the consumer. So that's very different from the call-out fees. The call-out fees may be that somebody wants their pressure tested, or they want their meter moved for a particular reason, or there may be other things they want. And as Paul said, we'll be consulting separately on those because we were concerned at the level of those costs. And when you asked about have we benchmarked costs elsewhere, we have done for gas and electricity, for ESB and for Board Gas Networks. And the same way we'll do it for Irish Water. And what we'll ask of them is a lot of detail about the wage rates of the people doing the work, and also the number of hours taken to do each piece of work. So it's going to be quite a detailed consultation. At the end of all that, we'll come up with a fixed rate plus a fixed number of hours as a standard charge. It may take more for some people and less for other people. We'll come out with a fixed set of rates that will bring clarity to that.
Okay. Yeah, following on. Sorry.
Do you think there's too much of expected of you in seeking to, here you are, Irish Water out there, we believe, imposing these charges. You believe it may well be that they're excessive, and you believe it may well be that there will be a rebate thereafter. So what that says to me is exactly what I've been saying all along. There's been a rush to charge here without adequate preparation to charge. You're not in a position to give a judgment on how adequate or otherwise those charges are, yet the consumer is being charged. And you are supposed to be, you're directed by government to be acting on behalf of the consumer and in the best interest of the consumer. And I'm afraid that's not in the best interest of the consumer.
Oh, it is our intention to bring clarity to everybody in relation to what those call-out charges would be at the earliest opportunity. But it is important that we do benchmark, that we do analyse these costs, and we also put them out for consultation in order to ensure that they are the correct level. You referred to something that I meant when I mentioned other means of income. I was merely referring to the subvention from the government. I wasn't referring to anything else. In terms of the costs and the reduction that we applied of 8%, you asked us three specific areas. In relation to the start-up costs, Irish Water forward is 181 million application in terms of start-up costs. We did analyse these in detail. We had, if you recall, Deputy, done a previous analysis of this at a much higher level at the request of the Minister. This time we carried out a more detailed analysis. Of the 181 million, we did find that the majority of those costs were efficiently procured in line with proper procurement processes, and that they were efficiently incurred, with the exception of 9.1 million, which we did not deem to be efficiently incurred, and as a result we disallowed 9.1 million of that expenditure. Those costs were primarily in the area of project management and the amount of money that they had spent on project management and some element of labour cost. In relation to OPEX, I think we all accept that Irish Water's cost base is too high. The challenge for us now is to put in place a regulatory framework that sees the pressure brought to bear on their cost base so that it is seen to reduce, and that it does reduce over time. For the initial 2-year interim revenue control, we have attached a 7% per annum reduction on their operating expenditure. In the first full price control, we would expect to be imposing even greater targets on Irish Water in terms of the reductions that they will need to see in their cost base in order that the charges to customers are brought down to as low as reasonable a level as is possible. This is not something that is done overnight. This is a programme, as has been seen right across Europe when it comes to utility regulation. These sorts of efficiencies are achieved over time. Nevertheless, the targets that we have set for Irish Water for this interim revenue control, we believe, are challenging, but they are realistic, i.e. they are achievable for Irish Water. And like I said, we would be looking at more stringent OPEX targets for them in the future. In terms of the payment system for staff, we don't get into, nor do we offer opinions on the payment systems that they have in place for their staff. I'll come back to the compliance, or in fact, Cathy, do you want to take the compliance rate and how do we factor that in?
No, yes, and the compliance rate, there were two aspects to that. All businesses have a certain level of bad debt, so you had to factor a level of bad debt into the calculations. But in addition, Irish Water didn't have a perfect database of who everybody was and where everybody lived. So we had to make an allowance for either people's name not being on the database or people having moved on. And we looked at a number of figures, and I'll come back to you if I'm incorrect, but from memory, we put a figure in of 80% in the model. But that didn't mean that we were expecting 20% of people not to pay. It was more covering off the other two assumptions that I mentioned.
In relation to the free allowances, you're right. In the original direction from the Minister, it mentioned 38,000 or such other number based on available data. We're happy to publish, and in fact I think we have published all the analysis that has been carried out in relation to deriving the 21,000 litre free allowance for children. And we will continue to be monitoring this, and we will continue to publish the results of that monitoring. There's absolutely no issue about that. The 21,000 that we have set is based on analysis of 3,000 households over a period from November 2013 to August 2014. And we're confident that that 21,000 is based on the best available data. We did not have that confidence around 38,000, which was based on a report, I think a decade old, based on UK consumption, and it wasn't actually necessarily about average consumption, it was more about the highest level of consumption for children. So the 21,000, in our view, represents the most accurate figure available to us today in terms of what the average consumption of a child is. And it's very important that we use the best available data, because the policy is quite clear that children are free. If we had stuck with the 38,000 or another number, we would have effectively been imposing a cross-subsidy from adults to children, or vice versa, and that would have been a situation that we would have been effectively not complying with our duty. So in terms of the charging for adult students, I'm afraid the position is quite clear that the entitlement to the free allowance is based around the PPS number, and it's child benefit. So it's only people who are in receipt of child benefit for whom a child allowance can be claimed, and that's basically the legal position. So that is reflected in the charging. And I think, and then your final question was in relation to the 40% for the non-dom sector. I think it's important to point out that we, from the very start, we made it clear that we were addressing domestic charges first. We have a huge body of work to undertake to actually ascertain what is the situation in relation to non-domestic charging. However, in the meantime, we recognised that there was a potential position whereby there could be a possible inequity around if water was subject to a notice declaring it to be unfit for human consumption. So we have made an exception in relation to the non-dom sector and introduced the 40% discount, which if we had stuck with our original position, we would not have made any changes to the non-domestic charging sector.
Final comment?
Briefly, when you're publishing the document, will you compare and contrast your analysis with the analysis that was in place, albeit from the UK, a 10-year-old? Compare and contrast that?
To the extent...
You said you did compare the two, so you should, the public would be interested to see what the comparisons were, contrasts are, and also in relation to what poverty proof analysis information was furnished to you and by whom, and will you publish that also? Because obviously that helped you to formulate an opinion as to what you believe to be a fair and equitable price.
Brief reply, Mr. McGowan, before I move to Deputy Mulhenry.
Issues of affordability are matters for government. Our analysis would have been based purely on what is the level of consumption associated with adults, children and households. And yes, we will carry out a comparison in relation to...
Deputy Mulhenry.